Hello friends, welcome to today's art lesson with Mr. Sai. Today we'll be looking at the topic techniques and tones. Technique in tones and shading. And our words will be shading and types of shading. What is a tone? A tone can be described as the darkness or the lightness of a color. Tone can be described as the darkness or the lightness of a color. Tones are used to create an illusion of solidity on objects, and it also helps to create that illusion of perspective in your drawing. It gives your drawing more volume, more weight, and more mass. Okay, so applying different tones to our drawing help us create that illusion of 3 dimension. Okay, so that your drawing doesn't look flat when it's done. So today we'll be looking at the simple techniques you can apply to achieve that, and also we'll be looking at types of shading. So let's go. The diagram in front of us here shows the various parts of a shading. So these are the things you need to note when you want to shade. Okay, so you can see the objects drawn here, and you can see that there are several parts that are labeled in this object, right? So you have the light tone. So the light tone is the lightest part of the object, is the part of the object that receive the most light. Okay, if you look down here, you see different tones ranging from dark to light. Okay, so the light tone, which is this one at the end here, you can see it reflects the lighter part, represents the lighter part of our object. Okay, then we have the mid tones. The mid tones are those tones that are in between the darkest part and the lightest part. So in that sense, the mid tones will be these two tones here in our tone charts. Alright, then the dark tones are the darkest part of our object. It means the part of our object that receives the least light, assuming that the object is placed in a position where it's receiving light from just a single source. Probably you put a bottle beside the window, and then the light is hitting the bottle on one side and casting a shadow on the other side. So that the parts of the bottle or the part of the object that receive the least light is where you call your dark tone. Alright, so that part is shaded darker than every part of the object, or colored with a darker tone than every other part of the object. Okay, so the dark tone in this drawing represents these first two tones here, because the tones are going from dark to light. Alright, so those are the things you need to take note of. Right, you have your dark tone here, you have your middle tones here, then you have your light tones here. Alright, then also don't forget the cast shadow. The cast shadow is actually the darkest part of the drawing. Though it's not on the object, but it also helps you create that illusion that the object is a solid object and gives it the look of 3 dimensionality. Alright, so I'm going to show you how to do this, and also do it with different type of shading techniques. Okay, so remember your light tone, your mid tones, your dark tones, your cast shadow, and also don't forget your baseline. Your baseline helps you position your drawing so that it doesn't look like it's floating in the air. Okay, so next we'll be looking at types of shading. Types of shading. Alright, so I have these apples here I want to use for my examples, and we are going to look at 4 types of shading, namely the blurring, the hatching, the cross hatching, and the pointillism. These are the most common type of shading techniques. There are other varieties of shading techniques, but this is the most common type, and this is what we are going to start with in this lesson. Okay, so we'll start with the blurring technique. Okay, so the first technique we're looking at here is blurring. So this is how it goes. So I'm going to start my following this tone chart up here, right? So I'm going to start my shading from the darkest tone. Okay, yeah, so this is the darkest part of, and in blurring technique, when you are shading with your pencil, you use the side of your pencil lead to shade. Okay, you hold the pencil at almost a flat angle and you use the side of the lead to spread tones onto your drawing. Okay, so that is the dark tone. Now I'm going to do my mid tones. My mid tone is lighter than my dark tones. Okay, and I'm also going to blend it a little. In blurring, you can blend your shading either by using a smudging rubber or by blending the tones on your paper using a tip of your finger. Okay, either way works. Okay, so this is my light tone, and then I'm going to leave some parts white, so those parts will be like my highlights, so they'll be like extremely white. Okay, the highlights are those parts of the object that is reflecting light. Okay, so it's usually shiny and it has a sparkle to it. Okay, so this is what blurring technique looks like. So I'm also going to put my cast shadow. Remember the cast shadow, it falls opposite the source of light on the floor and opposite the source of light. So there you have our cast shadow there. So then one more thing, let's not forget our baseline. Like I said, your baseline is like the preposition of your drawing. It tells the viewer or whoever is appreciating the work of art that that object is not just floating in the air. It has a position in relation to its environment. Okay, so you can see that this apple have just gone from being just a flat line drawing to a three-dimensional looking apple, something solid. So that's what you can do with tones. So I'm just going to shade part of the floor here. Okay, so this is blurring. Then the next one we're looking at is the hatching method. So this is the blurring method. I'm going to write it down here. Blurring. The next one is hatching. Now in the hatching method, you shade using the tip of your pencil by creating angular lines on your drawing and building on them to create your different tones, which is the dark tone, the mid tones, and the light tones. It's just quite simple. It's quite an interesting shading technique. This is what is used by most illustrated books that are not colored. It was used by most illustrated books that are done in black and white and not colored. Okay, they use hatching. So the more angular lines you put, the darker the tone it creates. So just keep building on that. So here I have my dark tone. Then I go for mid tone, and what do? I just put fewer lines than I've done on the dark tone. Then for my light tone, even lesser lines. Okay, and that's it. It's quite easy. I'm also going to put my cast shadow over here. So this is what hatching technique looks like. This technique is good for illustrations that will just be done that are done with pen and ink. Okay, all right, so the next one, this is hatch. So the next one is the cross hatching. So the cross hatching is simply creating hatching lines and then doing lines that are going the opposite direction to create a darker tone. Okay, so this is hatching. What hatching cross hatching looks like. First you hatch there, then you cross it with angular lines going the opposite direction to create your darker tones. This is also used for most book illustrations that are done in black and white. So the fewer the lines you have, the lighter the tone, and the more condensed the lines, the darker the tone. Okay, so that's cross hatching. Okay, Alright, so there you have this cross hatching. Then the final one is pointillism. Now in pointillism you use dots to create tones. So the more condensed or populated the dots, the darker the tone you create in that area. More dots leads to darker tones, lesser dots in the area we are shading leads to lighter tones. So, and that's all there is to it. So this type of shading can be used to create texture. To show texture in the object you have drawn. And also sometimes there are some objects you want to draw. You have to pick a type of shading that will work best for it. Like I find using pointillism when drawing oranges, I find it very useful. It really comes out very well because it shows the dimples on the oranges, the tiny dots there. Can achieve that using pointillism. Alright, but as you can see, using pointillism on this apple doesn't really make it look like an apple, but then you can see that we are creating tones already. Okay, so we have our dark tone here, then we have our mid tones after that, then the parts with the fewer dots, we have the light tone and the highlights. So that's pointillism for you. So you can try your hands on these different type of shading techniques in your art book, in your art drawing book. Make sure you practice them because they will come in handy for making illustrations and also other kinds of drawing. Okay, so hope you enjoyed today's lesson. See you.